Snow drifted outside a quiet Seattle restaurant, where veteran Ethan Cole sat with his daughter Lily and his loyal German shepherd, Ranger. Lily's legs were locked in metal braces, the scars of an accident that had stolen both her steps and her laughter. But when the piano began to play, Lily stood up trembling and reached out her small hand, not to her father, but to the black waitress, Nora Johnson. The room froze. Then Nora smiled, removed her apron, and took the girl's hand. In that fragile moment, a soldier, a waitress, and a child proved that miracles don't always come from heaven. Sometimes, they begin with a dance. Winter had settled over Seattle like a patient ghost, wrapping the city in pale fog and the slow, soundless fall of snow. Inside the waterfront restaurant Harbor Lights, warmth glowed against the glass, trapping the laughter of the wealthy and the faint music of a live piano. At a corner table near the window sat Ethan Cole, a 41-year-old veteran whose presence seemed to belong more to the battlefield than to the glittering hall of chandeliers and silver cutlery. He wore a dark wool coat, one knee slightly stiff beneath the fabric, the mark of shrapnel from a desert long ago. His jawline was sharp, his skin wind-burned and rough, his dark beard trimmed with precision, but unable to hide the fatigue that came from too many sleepless nights. His gray-green eyes, steady, trained, almost military, softened only when they turned toward his daughter. Lily Cole, 10 years old, sat across from him, her left leg held in a thin titanium brace. Her hair, light brown like her late mother's, was tied in a neat braid that brushed the shoulder of her red winter dress. She smiled shyly at the waiter who brought water, then returned to sketching tiny dogs and stars on her napkin. Between them lay a silence that was not unfriendly, only fragile. Ethan had spent the last 2 years learning how to live with quiet, the kind that followed explosions, funerals, and empty houses. Beside his chair lay Ranger, his German shepherd, 7 years old, a sturdy animal with a tan coat darkened around the back and face. His amber eyes flickered with intelligence, and the faint scar across his muzzle hinted at the same war Ethan had survived. Ranger's left ear twitched each time the piano hit a soft note, as if measuring the rhythm. Ethan adjusted the napkin, feeling the eyes of other diners. A veteran with a service dog and a child in braces, it wasn't the usual company at Harbor Lights. He caught a whisper, the kind meant to be overheard. Poor man. Probably one of those VA cases. Ethan ignored it. He had been trained to ignore worse. He looked to his daughter. "You doing all right, kiddo?" he asked softly. Lily nodded, her voice small. "It's pretty here." "Yeah," he said, managing a smile. "Your mom liked this place. Thought we'd come see it again." That name, Mom, hung in the air like frost. It had been 2 years since the car accident that took Sarah. Ethan had come home from deployment 3 days too late. Since then, his world had narrowed to therapy schedules, veterans' paperwork, and the soft sound of his daughter's crutches tapping across the floor at night. The piano shifted to a waltz. Couples near the bar began to sway, glittering in the golden light. And then, something unexpected. Lily pushed back her chair. Her leg brace creaked, her small hand gripping the table for balance. Ethan leaned forward. "Hey, careful, sweetheart." But Lily wasn't listening to him. Across the room stood Nora Johnson, one of the waitresses. She was tall and slender, her skin a deep copper tone, her black hair pulled back into a bun that framed a face both tired and kind. There was a quiet discipline in her movements, the kind of grace learned from long days of carrying trays heavier than her own dreams. When she laughed at another table's joke, it sounded like something warm enough to survive the snow outside. Lily stared at her for a moment, then limped toward her, one step at a time. The chatter around the restaurant faded. The child stopped in front of Nora, raised her trembling hand, and said with innocent courage, "Would you dance with me?" A collective hush fell. The manager, Mr. Thornton, a bald man with a polished smile, hurried over. "Miss Johnson," his voice sliced the air. "This is not a dance hall. Return to your duties." Nora froze, tray in hand. She glanced at the girl, at the braces, then at Ethan, who had risen halfway from his seat, uncertain whether to intervene or retreat. She saw in his posture a man used to command, but unsure of gentleness. Then she looked back at Lily's eyes, hopeful, pleading, brave, and her own decision was made. She set down the tray. "I can't dance in an apron," she said calmly. She untied the knot at her waist, folded the cloth, and laid it across a chair. The pianist, sensing something rare, softened the melody. "What do you think you're doing?" the manager hissed. "I'm accepting an invitation," Nora replied. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but the words never came. His daughter's hand, tiny and trembling, had already found Nora's. Together they stepped into the open space between the tables. The little girl's metal brace screeched faintly against the polished floor, but Nora didn't try to guide or correct her. She simply matched the rhythm, slow, patient, letting Lily lead. Ranger's head lifted. His tail brushed the floor like a metronome. The room watched. Ethan's throat tightened as the scene unfolded. For the first time since the accident, his daughter wasn't being helped or pitied. She was leading. Her face glowed, uncertain but determined. The reflection of the chandeliers shimmered in her eyes. A woman whispered, "She'll lose her job for that." Ethan heard it but said nothing. His hands, scarred from combat, clenched and released. Something inside him, the same part that once barked orders under fire, wanted to protect, to stop, to control. But another part, the one Sarah had loved, told him to stay still. He felt the ghost of his wife beside him, whispering what she once told Lily during therapy. "It's not about perfect steps. It's about the courage to try." When the music ended, the restaurant seemed to exhale. Nora knelt before Lily, smiling. "Thank you for asking me, Miss Cole. You dance beautifully." Lily's face shone with pride. "Thank you for saying yes." Applause broke out, soft at first, then real. Even the pianist smiled. Mr. Thornton stormed away, muttering. Nora rose, straightened her blouse, and turned to leave. That was when Ethan stepped forward. "Wait," he said. His voice came out rougher than intended. She stopped. He took a business card from his coat pocket, creased, military neat, and offered it. "My office. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Nora hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing the cost of defiance. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, taking the card. When she walked away, Ethan returned to his table. Lily reached for his sleeve. "Dad," she whispered. "Why did you do that?" Ethan looked at his daughter, at Ranger now resting his muzzle on her knee, and felt a strange mix of shame and gratitude. "Because," he said slowly, "I think she just reminded me what courage looks like." Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, something else, long frozen, finally began to thaw. The morning after the dance, the winter sky over Seattle was the color of pewter, the kind of gray that pressed low over the harbor and made even seagulls fall silent. Inside Coal Protection Services, the office smelled faintly of coffee and gun oil, a mix that clung to the walls like memory. The company, founded by Ethan Cole after he left the Army, specialized in private security and crisis logistics, contracts with shipping yards, corporations, and sometimes the government. But this morning, the place felt different. Ranger lay near Ethan's desk, his fur still damp from their walk through slush, while Ethan sat behind a stack of case files he wasn't reading. The card he'd given Nora Johnson last night lay on the table, its edges bent. He had expected not to see her again, yet part of him hoped she would come. The dance had lingered in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. At exactly 10 o'clock, the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Cole," came the voice of his assistant, Mara Quinn, a practical woman in her mid-30s with auburn hair and a sharp gaze. Years of managing field operatives had left her brisk and unsentimental, though beneath the surface she cared more than she ever admitted. "There's a woman here to see you. Says you invited her." "Send her in," Ethan said, straightening. He rubbed the stiffness in his knee, trying to hide the faint wince. When the door opened, Nora Johnson stepped in, wearing a navy blue coat that had seen better winters, a cream scarf tucked neatly around her neck. Without the restaurant uniform, she looked different, composed, unafraid. Her eyes held the calm of someone used to fighting quiet battles alone. "Miss Johnson," Ethan greeted, standing out of habit. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't sure if you meant it," she replied, glancing around the room. The walls bore photographs from Ethan's military years, deserts, convoys, faces of soldiers whose names she would never know. Ranger rose, tail flicking once, and trotted toward her, sniffing politely. "He remembers you," Ethan said. "He doesn't greet many people." Nora knelt slightly, letting Ranger sniff her hand. "He's got kind eyes," she said softly. "Soldiers do too sometimes. They just forget how to use them." That disarmed him. Ethan gestured for her to sit. "Coffee?" "No, thank you." He leaned forward. "I wanted to apologize for last night. I should have stopped the manager before he reminded me where people like me belong." Nora interrupted, her tone even. "It's not the first time, Mr. Cole. I don't hold grudges, only lessons." He studied her for a moment. "You handled it with grace. My daughter hasn't smiled like that in 2 years." "That's because she wasn't told how to move," Nora said. "She was allowed to move." The word struck him harder than expected. "You studied therapy?" She nodded. "Child development, NYU. I was 1 semester from finishing a master's in rehabilitation before my mother got sick. Medical bills don't pay themselves, so I took the first job that did." Ethan hesitated, then opened a folder on his desk. Inside were printed pages from an article. "I did some reading after you left." "Freedom Steps?" Nora's brows lifted. "You found that?" "It wasn't hard," he admitted. "A community center in Rainier Valley, right? Dance-based rehabilitation for disabled kids?" "Yes," she said. "I started it with my sister, Zoe Johnson, 6 years ago. She handles coordination, I handle instruction. We've kept it running on donations and borrowed space. But we're closing next month. The rent tripled." Ethan nodded slowly. "You should have told me that." "I didn't come for money, Mr. Cole." "Ethan," he corrected. "Just Ethan." "Then, Ethan," she continued, "I came because you asked." There was silence. Thick, but not uncomfortable. Ranger shifted beside her chair, his head resting near her boot. She scratched behind his ear absently, the gesture natural. Ethan watched her hand, steady, gentle, and thought of all the people who treated damaged things as fragile, not as capable. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to hire you, not as a waitress, as a rehabilitation guide for Lily." Nora blinked. "A guide?" Call it whatever you want. I've had every specialist, therapists, doctors, instructors. None of them reach her. But last night, he stopped, searching for words. Last night she led. That's never happened before. Nora folded her hands. And you think hiring me will make that happen again? I think you understand something the experts don't. She looked at him carefully. You mean you want me to teach her to walk again? I want her to believe she can, he said. Their eyes met across the desk. For a brief moment, the air carried more weight than words. Then Nora stood. No. Ethan rose as well. No. I don't work for people who try to buy what should be given freely. I work with those who want to build something real. He frowned. I'm offering to pay you 5 times what you make. And I'm offering you something money can't buy, she said calmly. Respect for your daughter's independence. She reached into her coat pocket and drew out a small business card. Plain white, handwritten. Freedom Steps. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. First session free. She placed it on the desk. Bring Lily if you want to see what real progress looks like. Ethan exhaled through his nose, fighting frustration and admiration at once. You're stubborn. Comes with experience? Nora replied, buttoning her coat. When the world tries to define your worth, sometimes the only protest you have left is to stand tall. As she turned toward the door, Mara appeared with a document in hand. She paused briefly, studying Nora with professional curiosity. Heading out already? Yes, Nora said with a faint smile. Some of us work double shifts. When she left, the office seemed emptier than before. Ethan stared at the card she'd left, its ink slightly smudged from her glove. Ranger nosed it gently, tail flicking once, as if urging his master to read it again. Ethan sank back into his chair, eyes wandering to the photo of Sarah on his desk, her smile frozen in another time, her hand resting on Lily's shoulder. He remembered her voice. You can't lead a child out of fear, Ethan. You can only follow her courage. He picked up the card. Freedom Steps, he murmured. Maybe it's time we both took one. Outside, the city continued to snow, soft and endless. Inside, a soldier began to plan his next mission. Not one of defense or strategy, but of learning how to let go. Snow melted into thin mist as Saturday morning stretched over the worn edges of Rainier Valley. Old warehouses stood like sleeping giants, their bricks scarred with time, their windows fogged by decades of breath and dust. One of them bore a hand-painted sign, Freedom Steps Community Center. Inside, the faint sound of a piano carried through the air, not polished or perfect, but alive. Ethan Cole parked his battered Jeep across the street. His daughter Lily, wrapped in a wool coat and scarf, leaned forward eagerly while Ranger, seated upright in the back seat, whined softly as if sensing their destination. Ethan hesitated before turning off the ignition. He was a man used to command and control, but nothing in his military training had prepared him for the battlefield of hope. Are we really going in? Lily asked, voice bright with both excitement and fear. Ethan forced a small smile. Yeah, kiddo, we're going in. He opened the door, stepped out into the cold, and circled to help her down. Ranger jumped out beside them, his breath steaming like smoke in the winter air. Together they crossed the cracked pavement toward the old building. The moment they entered, warmth and laughter spilled around them. The air smelled faintly of paint, hot cocoa, and something older, like persistence. Children moved in small groups across the open floor, some in wheelchairs, others with crutches or braces, all following rhythms that seemed to belong to their own heartbeat. At the center stood Nora Johnson, her posture relaxed but confident, wearing a simple gray sweater and black dance pants. Her hair was tied back, loose strands framing her face. The sight of her made Ethan straighten unconsciously. She smiled when she saw Lily and knelt. "You made it." Lily nodded shyly. "Dad said we could try." "And Ranger too," Nora added, reaching out to pat the dog's head. Ranger wagged his tail, immediately accepted as part of the class. Ethan stood off to the side, hands in his coat pockets, scanning the room like a soldier assessing terrain. His eyes caught a woman sitting near the far wall, writing notes on a clipboard. She was in her late 60s, tall and slender, her silver-gray hair braided neatly over one shoulder. She wore a long wool coat and glasses perched on a sharp nose that gave her the air of quiet authority. Nora waved her over. "Ethan, this is Dr. Elaine Mercer," she said. "She oversees the program." Dr. Mercer extended a hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "Mr. Cole, I've read about you. You run a private security firm, yes?" Ethan nodded, slightly wary. "Used to run operations in Kabul and the Gulf, now mostly domestic work." She smiled faintly. "War leaves its fingerprints everywhere, even on peace." Her words, gentle but piercing, made him blink. "You're a doctor of what exactly?" "Neuroscience," she replied. "I study brain plasticity, how movement and emotion can reshape neural pathways." Nora was one of my most promising graduate assistants before life pulled her elsewhere. That revelation caught Ethan off guard. "You two have history?" "Years of it," Dr. Mercer said warmly. "But Nora's the real pioneer here. This program was her design." Nora gave a modest shrug. "It's not about design. It's about giving kids permission to move their way." Ethan turned toward Lily, who now stood in front of a mirror-lined wall with two other children. Nora guided them to listen to the rhythm, not to copy, but to feel it. "There's no wrong step here," she told them. "Only steps that belong to you." The piano resumed, an uneven melody played by a teenage boy in a wheelchair, his fingers confident, though imperfect. Lily took a tentative step, then another. Ethan's throat tightened. He had spent 2 years counting her failures, timing her therapy sessions, demanding progress like it was a mission. But here, no one measured anything. The room pulsed with laughter, chaos, and warmth. A woman in a floral hijab approached, carrying a box of art supplies. She looked about 30, with expressive brown eyes and a quick, mischievous smile. "You must be the soldier," she said cheerfully. "I'm Zoe Johnson, Nora's sister. Co-founder, snack supplier, part-time referee." Ethan shook her hand. "Nice to meet you." "You brought your dog," she said, crouching to stroke Ranger. "Good choice. Dogs remind kids that joy doesn't need permission." He smiled faintly. "Ranger's been reminding me of that for years." As the session continued, Nora moved among the children like a conductor, adjusting her tone for each one. Gentle encouragement for some, playful teasing for others. Her patience wasn't rehearsed. It was lived. Every word she spoke carried the weight of someone who'd known pain, yet refused to pass it forward. Ethan couldn't stop watching her. Dr. Mercer joined him again, following his gaze. "You see it, don't you? She doesn't fix them. She follows them. That's the difference." Ethan nodded slowly. "I've spent my life giving orders. Maybe that's why my daughter stopped listening." The doctor looked at him kindly. "Leadership has its place, but healing begins when command ends." When the music stopped, Nora clapped her hands. "That's enough for today. Everyone grab cocoa." children scattered toward a folding table loaded with cups and marshmallows. Lily limped toward her father, cheeks flushed, hair loose from the braid. "Did you see, Dad?" she said breathlessly. "I walked without counting." Ethan crouched to her level, his eyes glassy. "I saw, kiddo. You did good." Ranger licked her hand, tail wagging. Nora approached, holding a thermos. "You two warm enough?" Ethan straightened. "She's happier here than I've seen in a long time." "That's the point," Nora said. "Happiness makes muscles braver." Dr. Mercer joined them, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "You know, Mr. Cole, we've tried reaching your foundation twice for funding." Ethan frowned. "My foundation?" "The Cole Veterans Fund," she said. "You redirected our proposal to another committee last year." He winced slightly. "I probably did. I get a lot of requests." "Understandable," she replied with mild reproach. "But I think this one might change your understanding of recovery, physical and emotional." Nora gave her mentor a look that was half warning, half gratitude. Ethan exhaled. "All right," he said quietly. "Send it again. I'll read it this time." Dr. Mercer smiled knowingly. "Good. Perhaps even soldiers can learn to follow." As they left the center that afternoon, the mist had turned to light snow again. Lily hummed the tune from the piano, Ranger trotting beside her. Ethan glanced back once. Through the window, he saw Nora closing the curtains, her silhouette framed by golden light. For the first time in years, he felt something steady inside him. Not duty, not guilt, but a fragile, necessary hope. He looked at Ranger. "What do you think, buddy?" The dog tilted his head, snowflakes clinging to his muzzle. Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah," he murmured. "We'll come back." The next Thursday arrived beneath a sky bruised with the color of steel. Snow had fallen again overnight, softening the streets of Rainier Valley into pale silence. Inside Freedom Steps, the warmth of life returned. The scent of cocoa, the hum of laughter, and the faint rhythm of a piano tune that seemed to breathe with the children's movements. Ethan Cole stood by the door, removing his gloves while Ranger, his German shepherd, padded beside him, tail swishing in measured arcs. The dog's breath formed brief clouds in the air, his amber eyes alert, guarding as always. Lily walked ahead, using one crutch today instead of two. Her braces gleamed faintly under the light, polished by her father that morning. "You sure about this, kiddo?" Ethan asked, his voice both proud and uncertain. Lily nodded, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "Nora says I should trust the music, not my fear." Nora Johnson, standing at the center of the floor, turned toward them. She wore a dark blue sweatshirt with the Freedom Steps logo stitched over the heart. Her hair was tied loosely today, a few strands escaping the bun to brush her cheek. There was an energy around her, a mix of focus and warmth, as if she carried both command and compassion in equal measure. "Right on time," she said, smiling. "We're doing something special today." Dr. Elaine Mercer was already present, seated at a folding table near the wall, typing notes into her laptop. She looked more formal than usual, wearing a long black coat and silver brooch. Next to her stood two journalists, Caleb Warren, a man in his 40s with graying stubble and an instinctive habit of scanning everything, and Maya Lin, a young photojournalist with a camera hanging from her neck and restless curiosity in her eyes. Both were invited by Dr. Mercer to observe the class for an article on community rehabilitation projects. Ethan hadn't known about this. He stiffened slightly. "Reporters?" he muttered. Dr. Mercer adjusted her glasses. "Transparency helps awareness, Mr. Cole. Don't worry." No one's here to harm anyone's dignity. Nora gave him a reassuring glance. If you'd rather step out— No, Ethan said quickly. Lily can handle it. Music began. A slow, steady waltz that filled the wooden hall like a heartbeat. Nora guided the children into formation, her tone calm but firm. Lily joined a small circle of kids, one in a wheelchair, another with a prosthetic leg. They began moving to the rhythm. Ethan watched from the edge, arms folded, heart hammering. Halfway through the song, something shifted. Lily hesitated, then, without cue, she dropped one crutch, letting it clatter softly against the floor. For a second, time froze. Even Ranger stopped wagging his tail. "Dad," Lily called quietly. "Watch me." Ethan took a step forward. "Lily, wait!" Nora lifted a hand to stop him. "Let her." The room fell silent except for the music. Lily steadied herself, her body trembling, brace glinting. Then she took a step, unsteady, imperfect, but her own. Her second step followed, more sure. The piano slowed, matching her rhythm. Every child stopped to watch. Ethan's throat tightened. His mind flashed through every hospital room, every specialist, every sleepless night, when he had whispered to a photo of his late wife, Sarah, "Tell me what to do." Now the answer came in the form of silence. He didn't need to do anything. Lily's third step landed firmly. Her balance wavered, then held. A laugh escaped her lips, bright as sunlight on snow. Nora exhaled, eyes glistening. Dr. Mercer's fingers trembled slightly as she typed. "Neural adaptation," she whispered to herself, but her smile betrayed pure emotion. The applause came gently at first, then louder. Even Ranger barked once, as if to announce his pride. Caleb Warren lowered his notepad. "That," he said softly, "is not something you see every day." Maya's camera clicked rapidly, capturing the moment. A girl between steps, her father's reflection shining in the mirror behind her. Ethan crossed the room slowly. Lily turned, reaching for him. He knelt and wrapped his arms around her, careful not to press the brace. "You did it, sweetheart," he murmured, voice breaking. Lily grinned, tears bright on her cheeks. "I told you I could." Reporters approached Nora. "How long has she been training?" Caleb asked. 2 weeks, Nora replied. But the real work started long before, inside her. Maya looked at Ethan. "Sir, would you mind saying something for the article?" He hesitated, unused to attention. "I'm just her father," he said quietly. "And maybe today I learned that courage doesn't always wear uniforms." Dr. Mercer smiled approvingly. "Well said." As the reporters packed up, Nora approached Ethan. "You okay?" He nodded. "Better than I've been in years." Ranger brushed against Nora's leg, tail sweeping. She bent down to pat his head. "You too, soldier. You kept her safe." The dog leaned into her touch, as if understanding the compliment. A knock at the door drew everyone's attention. A tall man entered, shoulders broad beneath a city maintenance jacket dusted with snow. His name was George Hill, mid-50s, a city official responsible for local property permits. He had deep creases at the corners of his eyes and the weary patience of someone who'd seen too much bureaucracy. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "Ms. Johnson, we've got an issue with your renewal papers. The building's zoning might change next month." Nora frowned. "Again?" "I'll try to push it through," George said kindly. "But you might need new funding. The city's cutting back." Ethan listened quietly. "How much do you need to keep it open?" Nora shook her head. "Don't, Ethan. We've been down this road." He looked at Dr. Mercer, who nodded slightly as if to say, "This is your moment." Ethan turned to the reporters. "You came for a story," he said. "Here's one. A program that gives kids back their courage is about to lose its roof because no one's paying attention." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a statement." "I mean every word," Ethan said firmly. "And I'll make sure the Cole Foundation doesn't look away again." For a long moment, Nora said nothing. Her eyes softened. "You don't owe us anything." "I owe my daughter everything," he replied, "and she found herself here." The conversation ended not with applause, but with quiet understanding. Nora returned to her students, Dr. Mercer to her notes, the reporters to their deadlines. Ethan crouched beside Ranger, running his hand along the dog's back. "Guess we just enlisted again, huh, buddy?" Ranger gave a low bark, his tail thumping once against the floor. Outside, snow began falling anew, thick and patient. Through the frosted windows, Ethan watched Lily help another child move to the music. She was teaching now, showing what freedom looked like one step at a time, and for the first time since the war, Ethan felt truly at peace. 6 months later, spring crept into Seattle, washing away the gray of winter with thin sunlight and the scent of blooming magnolias. The snow was gone, but in the courtyard of the newly rebuilt Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center, a white sculpture of a child and a dog stood as a reminder of the season that had changed everything. The statue, crafted from marble and placed near the entrance, showed a little girl mid-step, her hand extended, and beside her, a German shepherd watching proudly. The dedication plaque beneath read, "To those who dare to take the first step." The grand opening drew a small crowd, children, parents, volunteers, city officials, and reporters. Ethan Cole stood near the stage, wearing a dark suit that didn't quite fit his soldier's frame. His shoulders were broad, his hair neatly trimmed, a faint silver line cutting through the brown. He looked healthier now, though the faint limp remained. At his side sat Ranger, tail sweeping the ground patiently, now 8 years old but still strong, his muzzle dusted with gray like his master's temples. Lily, dressed in a light blue dress and a new brace that reached only to her calf, was adjusting her speech note cards nervously. Nora Johnson approached, clipboard in hand, looking composed yet radiant. She wore a cream blouse tucked into dark trousers, her hair free today, curling softly around her shoulders. The sunlight caught the copper in her skin. Behind her was Dr. Elaine Mercer, wearing her signature gray coat and glasses, her expression proud yet restrained. "You've done it, Nora," the doctor murmured. "You built what you once only dreamed." Nora smiled faintly. "No, we built it, and some dreams needed a soldier's stubbornness to stand." Her eyes drifted toward Ethan, who was helping Lily rehearse quietly. The ceremony began with George Hill, the city official, stepping to the microphone. He looked tidier than before, in a pressed navy jacket, but the tired kindness in his eyes was unchanged. 6 months ago, this building was scheduled for demolition, he began. Today, it stands as one of Seattle's first public-private rehabilitation partnerships. Thanks to community efforts and to the Cole Foundation, Freedom Steps now belongs not to bureaucracy, but to the people it serves. His words were met with applause. Ethan felt an odd tug in his chest, half pride, half humility. It was strange being praised for something that no longer felt like charity, but duty. Ranger leaned his head against Ethan's leg, grounding him. Then came the highlight. Lily stepped forward, small and graceful, the microphone adjusted to her height. The crowd hushed. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. A year ago, I thought I'd never walk without help. My dad tried everything. Doctors, machines, exercises, but what I needed was what Miss Nora gave me. A place where no one told me how to move. She paused, glancing at her father. Sometimes, freedom is just when someone believes you can. Ethan's eyes burned. He blinked quickly and smiled through the blur. Ranger gave a soft whine as if sensing the emotion. After Lily's speech, applause filled the courtyard. The reporters moved forward for photos as children from the program gathered near the new dance floor. Among them was a boy with a prosthetic leg, spinning in perfect rhythm, and a girl who moved her wheelchair in slow, elegant arcs. Nora clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, show time." Music began. Not the rigid notes of a piano, but a live string quartet led by Maya Lin, the young photographer who had fallen in love with the project and now volunteered her weekends playing cello. Beside her, Caleb Warren, once a reporter, now served as the Foundation's communications advisor. His rough face softened as he watched the children move, tapping the rhythm on his notepad. Nora stepped into the center with Lily. "Ready?" she whispered. "Ready," Lily said, smiling. The melody swelled. Lily took her first step, unassisted. Nora followed her lead, moving slower to match her. The children joined in, forming a circle, each moving differently. Some on crutches, some in chairs, all with joy written across their faces. The audience rose to their feet, clapping in rhythm. Ethan stood still, heart thundering. He had led platoons through war zones, commanded men in chaos. But here, watching his daughter dance, he felt something he never had before: the peace of surrender. Dr. Mercer moved beside him, her tone low but filled with pride. "You see it now, don't you? The science was always there. But faith, that part can't be studied." Ethan chuckled softly. "You're right. Faith and patience, two things the Army never trained me for." When the music ended, the crowd erupted in cheers. Lily turned, flushed with triumph, and ran, not walked, toward her father. He caught her easily, spinning her once before setting her down. Ranger barked twice, circling them like a sentinel celebrating victory. Nora approached, laughter in her eyes. Ethan looked at her and said quietly, "You didn't just give her freedom. You gave it back to me too." Nora's voice softened. Sometimes healing isn't about standing tall. It's about knowing when to kneel beside someone until they're ready. As the sun began to set, painting gold across the glass walls of the new center, Ethan helped close the ceremony by cutting the ribbon with Lily. Flashbulbs flared. Reporters captured the image that would appear in newspapers the next morning. "Veteran and daughter dedicate Freedom Steps Center." When the crowd began to disperse, Ethan stayed behind with Nora. The courtyard was quiet now, except for the rustle of magnolia leaves and Ranger's breathing. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked. Nora leaned on the railing. "Next is continuing. Growth doesn't end at grand openings." He smiled. Spoken like a leader. She shook her head. "No, Ethan. Like someone who learned to follow." He laughed quietly at that. "Then maybe we're both students now." Ranger pressed between them, sitting proudly, eyes half closed in contentment. Lily's laughter echoed from inside, mingling with music and distant chatter. Ethan looked up at the sky, remembering Sarah, the woman who once told him that love wasn't control, but courage shared. He whispered under his breath, "You'd have loved this, Sarah. You'd have loved her." Nora glanced at him. "What was that?" "Just thanking an old friend," he replied, smiling faintly. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Freedom's steps glowed with warm light. The veteran, the waitress, the child, and the dog stood together at its doors. 4 souls bound not by blood or duty, but by the quiet miracle of learning to follow where love leads. And when they finally left, Ranger paused at the statue by the entrance, staring at the marble girl mid-step. He gave one small bark, as if saluting her courage, before trotting after his family into the night. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from heaven. They come quietly, in the rhythm of small steps. A veteran lays down his pride. A child takes her first step. A woman chooses faith over fear. And somewhere between the music and the silence, God breathes. In Freedom's steps, no one prayed for wealth or fame. They prayed for courage, the courage to follow when God whispers, "Walk." Because when we dare to move, even trembling, heaven moves with us. The Lord doesn't always heal by removing pain. Sometimes, He heals by teaching us to rise despite it. If this story touched your heart, remember, miracles are not far away. They live in the patience of a parent, in the loyalty of a dog, in every act of compassion we choose daily. Maybe your step today, no matter how small, is the one God will use to change another life. Before you go, share this story of hope with someone who needs to believe again. Comment below where you're watching from. Let's see how far faith can travel. And if you believe that God still performs miracles, click subscribe, join our family of light, and let's keep walking together under His grace. May the Lord bless you, guide your steps, and remind you that no journey is too broken for Him to heal.